is he?
Say hi to Mom, cheater.
Excuse me. Oh, God. Is this a threesome?
It's for a play.
What play?
When I say it's a process of discovery, obviously I think we have to start with the actors in this film, a real family working out fictional issues, but with some real emotions in there as well, perhaps. Tell us a little bit about the casting process and how that entwined with the movie you wanted to make here.
Yeah, so Keith Kupferer, who is the lead of the film and is so incredible, he and I did a play together in Chicago 10 years ago called The Humans, and could see up close every night what an incredible actor he was. And so when I started writing this and thinking about, the role is nearly impossible because it's a guy who has to be a believable construction worker who starts off being not a skilled actor, who then by the end is doing Shakespeare, so emotionally and brilliantly, and has to be funny and has these bouts of anger. Like, we knew it could only really be Keith. And so I wrote the part with him in mind. And we do these readings. We almost treat our movies like new plays, and we gather actors and we do readings, and he did a reading for it, and afterwards he emailed me and he said, when the time comes, I'd love to audition. And I got to send an email back that said, you don't have to, because I wrote it for you. And you want to talk about Catherine and Tara?
Yeah. Catherine Malin Kupfer, Keith's daughter, we had not seen her in Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, though it obviously had received a lot of acclaim, and we were aware of her. But Keith emailed about a month after that reading and was like, listen, my daughter would kill me if I didn't say she'd love to be considered for the role of Daisy. She really likes the idea of cussing at me on camera. The idea of auditioning her didn't feel quite right, so we brought her to a reading, just like we had Keith, and she was awesome. She was just Keith's daughter. She was what you saw on screen, essentially. The rest kind of fell into place. Our casting director, Mickey Pascal, was like, you wrote this for this family, without knowing it. We ended up offering Tara the role in her garage when we were stealing props from her theater. And because Keith is very similar in some ways to Dan, she knew nothing about the film except that he was in a film. And Kelly was like, so what do you think of the script? And she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that was 2 weeks before we started shooting. So It all came together.
And as you're saying, there's some overlap here between portrayer and character. So I'm curious, and maybe we'll backtrack a little bit just to talk about the inspiration point for this story, but how you went into it, why you did want to write this piece, and how the fact of their involvement, their collective involvement, helped shape it from there.
Yeah. Well, I'm a theater actor, and I started writing it during the pandemic when all the theaters were closed, and I was very much missing my community. And so it started from a place of loneliness and really wanting to be able to go and make something with my friends. And then the National Theatre of London had put out a trailer for their production of Romeo and Juliet starring Josh O'Connor and Jessie Buckley. And I watched that trailer, and by the end of it, I was crying because I was like, oh my gosh, I think I like Shakespeare. At least in this moment I do, because I think in the pandemic, we were all looking for touchstones that we could go back to and feel comforted by. And I was also thinking about, I'm getting older, and I was pregnant when we filmed this, and I have begun thinking of stories from a new point of view, from a more parental point of view. And so I used to think of Romeo and Juliet as, one of the most romantic stories ever. And now I think of it as such a waste. And so wanting to revisit that story from the perspective of a parent and of sort of from Lord Capulet's point of view.
So as these actors come into the story then, did you notice things changing about the way you were telling the story, given the uniqueness of their dynamics together? What did they bring to the script from there?
I mean, we lucked out. We started out with the Kupfer Malins, or the Malin Kupfers. So our first 5 days were just with them. And so they were fun and funny and brought these little bickering specificities to our days. And those ended up working their way into the takes. And we would see Tara like correcting Catherine, like, stop that, quit. And we were like, okay, so why don't we start the scene with that exact interaction and see where that energy takes us. And the same thing would happen with Keith, where the two of them had such a playfulness that we felt really comfortable letting them improvise and feel their way through things.
Keith gave Catherine the line, Leonardo DiCaprio does not look like that anymore. So they would feed each other they'd be like, try this next time. And he came up with the line of when she's like, are you gonna shave? We don't have time. Well, what'd you bring it up for then? Like, he improvised that just based on his and Tara's dynamic, because they met when they were 19. When she saw him on stage, and so they've been together, forever. And I think you sense that history, and that history sort of makes its way into the threading of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious structurally how you thought about the reveals of the movie, particularly what happened to this family, the way they experienced it specifically, how you wanted to dole out that information, and how you wanted to involve the audience, because it's a very careful balance you strike.
Yeah, a huge inspiration for me was Manchester by the Sea. I love that film so much. I love the writing of it, and I love that it's a mystery for a while in that film. And so when I was thinking about this and thinking about not wanting the audience to get too ahead of it, I knew that we wanted to breadcrumb out the information so that you're sort of finding out at the same rate as the ensemble is finding out, and it's keeping you leaning forward rather than sitting back and saying like, oh, I know exactly how this goes.
Yeah. In the filmmaking, particularly in the rehearsals in the opening parts of the film, what kinds of things about the theater world, about community theater, did you really want to bring out? I love like the detail of everyone kind of swapping roles and just kind of making it day by day, but what did you really want to bring forward from that world?
I think the love of it, the pure love. I think when acting becomes your profession, suddenly you get stressed about bills and insurance, and I have such a soft spot in my heart for the people who have day jobs that, they have no intention of going to Broadway or to moving to LA. They just love it. And so the scrappiness of, finding costumes and building the set together and helping each other learn lines, that it really is sort of, it's got that summer camp vibe. It's like a team sport for people who aren't good with sports. And I'm wanting to have that, like, the joy.
Yeah. What about for you, Alex?
Well, I was just thinking, like in the script, Kelly lists out all the props that are sort of surrounding the rehearsal space. And I was just thinking how in community theater, it's like, we don't have money, but we do have 4 different types of telephones for your character to choose from for the next production of Death of a Salesman.
Yeah.
I think that the fun of it for me was that is what it's like to make film work. An
independent film,
an independent
for sure.
film particularly. Those actors were really pulling costumes out of a box that we had scavenged from 5 theaters across Chicago. So in some ways we wanted to make sure that we were rolling the cameras for their discoveries as well.
And I loved teaching them theater games because as stupid as you may think they are, as soon as you honestly teach adults theater games and they start playing them, it's really fun and it's really funny. And so we actually just taught them those games and filmed as they played. Oh, wow. And people were laughing so hard that, I think Tara was watching the monitor and she like fell over off her chair because it was so funny.
Can you talk about casting Dolly DeLeon, who's so perfect for this part? Very different, I feel like, from what I've gotten to see her do in the past.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Dolly DeLeon, who we knew first from Triangle of Sadness, we'd been wanting to work with since we saw that film. We happened to share a manager, and so we knew that there was sort of a personal connection that we could go after. But sometimes I think the most organic choice, and I've said this before, is like, yes, the head of this theater should be somebody who's based in Manila. Because Dolly, it was just, her background is theater. She has this incredible warmth and generosity, but is also a ferocious performer. All those things just were a wonderful contrast to Keith. Their Zoom together when Keith and Dolly first met was so funny. That dance scene you mentioned is so sweet because that really is Dolly becoming comfortable working with us. And Keith finally kind of cracking after 5 or 6 days of, playing Dan at home, which is a very closed-off character.
Yeah. How do you guys find your dynamic as co-directors? How has that evolved? How did it work on this movie?
Yeah, we're a couple in real life.
Yeah.
And we made a previous movie together called St. Francis that I wrote and acted in, and Alex directed it. So I think we're just becoming more and more comfortable with it. And I can't remember if I said this, I was 8 months pregnant when we shot the film. And so we were in the midst of making our own family while making this very family-centric film. And so, I mean, I joke that boundaries don't exist for us. It's just like the personal and professional mixed all together.
I do think I see those results, and we keep cool heads. So,
and I also think humor really helps with that. You know, humor opens us up. The other day I was like watching Instagram reels and I was laughing, and all of a sudden I found myself just like the laughter turned into crying. And I was like, oh God, they are so, you know, they're so intricately connected. Yeah. And so I think, you know, in the way that I write, it's really important to have the humor there to open you up so that then you can feel everything else that comes with it.
I think especially that comes through in the climactic Romeo and Juliet production, which is so powerful. How did you conceive of it? How did you want it to be mounted? And what came alive in the filming of it? Because it's really electric to watch.
We literally said, this is not for the house. This is not for the audience. This is a scene between you and your son. And we made the choice that he would kiss Juliet on the head, on the forehead, instead of on the lips. And I think Keith, to his credit, just took all those little choices and unlocked something just deeply vulnerable that I've never seen in an actor I've directed before.
He was incredible, and I remember I was crying at the monitor, and I think I was like, okay, let's go one more time, because I wanted to enjoy his performance one more time. It was very selfish, and he was like, okay, and then about 30 seconds later, we were about to go again, and he goes, I'm not going to do it any different. And I was like, okay, we don't need to. We can move on. We got it. But yeah, it was. I think his performance is just the most beautiful thing in the world in that scene.
Yeah, just watching it unlock, I think, is a powerful thing. Yeah, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it.